Hi everyone at DynamicsCon, and thank you for attending this session. I'm Micha Vuk, and I'm a software architect at Docentric. We are specialized in providing technology to enhance document report customization and report distribution in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. In today's session, we will show how you can automate report distribution to external applications using business events, Azure Event Grid, and Azure Storage. We will give some motivation and describe our use case and the goals that we try to achieve. Then we will briefly describe the used technologies and how to combine them for the integration. The biggest part will be the demo. We will first describe what we will do, and then we will show everything in practice. Dynamics 365 for finance and operations as a central ERP system produces many business documents that are useful for other applications. Beside the content of each document, each document has a set of metadata that are essential for its use. We want to show how simple it is to give these applications the documents and metadata that they need. The picture on the right somehow illustrates that. These applications can be very different in technology. They can run in different domains outside your company, and they can be set up later when your finance and operations implementation project is already finished. Therefore, we would like a loosely coupled integration that is handled outside of your F&O. Let's take a look at two basic integration approaches and explain why publish-subscribe is best suited for our use case. With direct integration, all external applications are directly connected to the central system like finance and operations. It gives you a tightly coupled system where all integration details are managed centrally. With publish-subscribe approach, external applications just subscribe to notifications when they need it. The central system just publishes the data and does not care about the subscribers. It results in a loosely coupled system that is easier to manage. So, how can we implement a publish-subscribe integration with your F&O? This session talks about business events and event grid, and these are actually two publish-subscribe technologies. Finance and operations provide business events mechanism that lets external system receive notifications called events when something important happens. For example, when workflow is approved, when purchase order is confirmed, or when you post a sales invoice. An event definition defines the fields that will be contained in the event when it will be triggered. On the upper right picture, you can see the sample event content. You subscribe external application to an event through an endpoint. Several endpoint technologies are supported. Today we will focus on Azure Event Grid, but you can also use the others. Business events are simple publish-subscribe system managed inside finance and operations, which offers a reliable delivery but miss the filtering and monitoring features. So the picture in the upper right shows the JSON payload of a business event. On the other side, Azure Event Grid is a fully managed event routing service running in Azure. It offers a strong publish-subscribe infrastructure with lots of features and can integrate with many technologies. It is intended for discrete events. These are events that happen irregularly and typically need some reaction. Events are grouped in topics. Stock's price change could be an example of a topic, or posted sales invoice. Various publishers can publish events to one topic, and several subscribers can subscribe to them. Event Handler is an application consuming the event that implements the reaction. Among possible technologies for event handlers, let's mention Azure Functions and Logic Apps. With Azure Functions, you run your code in .NET or other languages, while with Logic Apps, you visually design the workflow. Both run somewhere in Azure, and you do not have to care about the servers. It's called serverless computing, which allows you to pay by consumption and scale up when needed. Event Grid offers reliability, trackability, scalability, filtering, monitoring, and much more. Now we know something about technology, and let's see how we can use it in practice. So let's start with a demo. In the demo, we will show how we can combine business events, Azure Event Grid, and Azure Storage to send the business documents with their metadata from finance and operations to all subscribers. So the story begins when we post the sales invoice in finance and operations. It creates a document and the journal record. That's the standard functionality. But from this point on, everything else is our customization. It saves the document to Azure storage and gets a download link, allowing anyone with the link to download the file. Then Finance and Operations creates a business event containing invoice metadata, like invoice ID, and the download link. It sends the event to Event Grid. Event Grid then sends this event to all subscribers. For the introduction, we will show some simple subscriptions, like sending an email. Then we will go to the real ones. First real one will be the self-service customer portal, which is a web application running on your server. This portal allows your customers to see the relevant information, how they collaborate with your company. In this case, we will start from a known web API and we will use Logic Apps to call it. The second application will be the customer's ERP system running in their domain. Therefore, we will have to filter the events to send just the events for this customer. In this case, we will start from C# code sample, which we got from the customer, and we will use Azure Functions to run it. Later, when everything is up and running, we can add additional subscriber applications if needed. Now, let's see it in practice, and we will come back to this diagram at each step. Okay, let's start in our Finance and Operations. Finance and Operations out of the box supports business events catalogs that contains a list of out-of-the-box business events. Each business event contains a list of fields that it has. So we can also add custom events, and we will just do that. We will implement our custom event with a sales invoice data that also contains a document URL, a link to our document. So we first have to make a data contract class that's extended from a business events contract and implements all the data members. Just remember the invoice ID data member and the document URL. It also has the initialization method, and in our case, we initialize this data contract from a customer invoice journal record and from the document URL. Then we also have to do the business event class that's extended from the business event base, implements the initialization, and also the build contract method that creates a contract based on these initialization parameters. And when we are done with this and we build the solution, what I already done, we can go and rebuild business event catalog, and we get our custom events here. Here's the list of fields of our custom event, and we can also download the schema. That's actually not a schema, but a sample payload. Now we have a custom event, but we still have to trigger it to send it somehow. So for this, we will add the code that will send an event. And we will put this code on the event handler when a document is created in a standard SSRS pipeline. To simplify the coding, we have installed the Docentric free edition. That's a free add-in that you can find off the web that gives you a bit more event handlers and API, but you can also do without it from scratch. So we have just subscribed to this code event, and where we receive a memory stream with the report content and the customer invoice journal record. Then we call the code for sending, for constructing and sending the business event. We first upload this document content to Azure Blob Storage and get a download link, an anonymous download link. So anyone with a link can use it. We have to set the validity of a link, but we set it to 100 years, so enough for everyone. Then we construct the business event from customer invoice journal record and download link and send an event. That's the standard method for sending a business event. Business events are actually just put in the outgoing queue and are sent asynchronously. So you have to run a batch service to really send these business events. But where will these business events be sent? So these business events will be sent to the endpoints that we defined. So let's define an endpoint. Among different technologies for the business events, we will select event grid. Okay, let me just, so far we have created the document in finance and operations. We have uploaded this document to Azure storage, and we have got back a download link. Then we have created a business event contract, a business event, and we have prepared this business event, and we are just about to send this business event to event grid. Okay. So we are now creating a new endpoint to event grid. Okay. We will name it. Then we have lots of parameters that we have to fill up. And the first parameter is the endpoint URL of our Azure event grid topic. Now we will go to our Azure portal. And I've already created some Azure resources to save some time, but I've just created. I haven't done anything else. So let's go here. And we find the topic endpoint here. This is a topic endpoint, and paste it here. Now, to access this event grid topic, you need an access key. But you cannot enter this access key directly on this forum, but we have to store this access key in an Azure Key Vault. And just go to the key vault that we have generated. Here we have secrets. And good, let's name it. And enter this secret here. Okay. This is the name of a secret that contains an access key for the event grid topic. We will also need an address of our key vault. And then the form asks us for Azure Active Directory ID and its secret. So we have created in the Azure Active Directory under app registrations, I've already created a new app, DynamicsCon Event Grid Demo app, and that we will use for the demo. This is the ID of an application ID. We put it here, and let's store it also in notes for. And then we also need an app password. That's called a client secret, but it's actually like an app password. And because we can only see it once, I will save it here. And now we have everything. Let's try if it works. Okay, it doesn't work. And it seems unable to get the secret from Key Vault. Oh yeah, we forgot something. Let's go to our, okay. We have to grant permission to these applications to access the key vault. Let's add access policy. This is the application ID. No. This is our application. And let's grant permission to access the secret. Don't forget to save it. I often do it. And let's try now. Okay, this time we were successful. And once we have an endpoint, we can go to the event and activate it. We select an endpoint and the company where we want to make the subscription. And we have successfully configured business event, our custom business event for company USMF. So if we go back to slides, now we have prepared everything to send the business event to event grid. Let's continue. Now we have a event grid topic, but we don't have any subscriptions. So let's create a simple one. And the simple subscription is just storing the event to Azure Storage Queue. And before we do it, let's create the storage queue. Okay. Let's create an events storage queue. And let's, okay, we already created an invoices. Let's go now to event grid here and select storage account. Okay. So now we will create a subscription, not send email. Now we will create a simple subscription that will just save an event to storage queue. Now let's add something slightly more complicated. And let's create a simple workflow. We'll do it with Logic App to send an email. Okay, Logic App send email. That's all fine. And let's create it. Okay. It normally takes up to a minute to create a resource. We will, our workflow, we'll get an event, and then we will have many options what to do with it. Deployment is in progress. Okay, we have a resource. So we have created a Logic App. Let's start with a blank Logic App. And every Logic App, every workflow starts with a trigger. We will use an Azure Event Grid trigger that's triggered when a resource event occurs. First, we have to sign in so that this connector will use our identity to access Event Grid and do all operation on. We select the subscription, the type of resource that we are listening, and our sales invoice topic. That's it. In this first step, we have actually received an event grid event. And the data field of event grid event, as we will see later, will contain the business event. But we still have to parse this event because it's a string containing a JSON content. So among all fields of an event grid event, we will parse the data object. And this data object is actually a business, has a content of a business event, and we have to provide a schema for it. We don't have a schema, but we have a sample payload. We will go that way, and we will derive the schema from a sample payload. This process works quite fine, but it doesn't distinguish between integers and real numbers. So for the amounts, we have to manually correct this. And then we have it. So now we have the content, the structured content of a business event, and we can send an invoice. Not send an invoice, send an email. So these blue elements are called connectors. The others are called actions. Let's say it to event grid demo at Docentric.com. Subject new invoice. Please find attached invoice, and we can add some dynamic content. So, for example, invoice ID. And beside this dynamic content in a body, we also want to add a document attachment. But so far, we don't have a document attachment. We just have a document URL. So let's add a step here to download the content from this document URL that we got in the business event. Good. And now we're good to go. We can get it. Now we can get this content of a document from HTTP body response. You also have to give a name to this. And it's a PDF file. Now we are ready. We can save it, and if we refresh it, now our event grid topic already has 2 subscriptions. And it's time that we send some events. Let's go back to our finance and operations, and we will post an invoice. When we will post an invoice, the document on the invoice document will be created, and the business event will be sent to event grid. Okay, we have a posting flag, we have a print invoice flag, we print it to the screen. I will just lower the quantities that I can post the same sales order multiple times. And now we are posting a sales invoice. Good. It's our sample sales invoice. And when the sales invoice document has been generated, the business event has been sent to event grid, and the event grid has sent this event to both subscriptions. Let's go to this logic app, refresh it, and we see below 1 execution. And if we click on this execution, we can see for every element what was the input and what was the output. And let's see. Let's just select this and show it here. So this is an event grid event. So these are all standard fields for our event grids event. And just this data field contains the whole content of a business event. So, for example, this is a document URL, and this is an invoice account. This is an invoice ID. It would be much nicer if this content would be sent as a JSON object, but it is sent as a string containing JSON object. So it's slightly different. It's a slight difference that we will also see in the later part of a demo. Okay, so that was the event grid event. Then we parse just the data field and get a business event. So that's much nicer and easier to see and easier to read. And then we also download the document and send an email. Okay, and as a final result, let's check if we have received this email. And we have received it. So that's our email. If we click on the document, we see the document. So that's it. Now we have just demonstrated some simple event grid subscriptions. Now let's go for the first real case. So it's a self-service customer portal where that's a portal that your company provides for your customers, and every customer can log in and see all the invoices and other important information about the collaboration between this customer and your company. So this is how it looks like. It's a sample application, but looks quite nice. So if we go to invoices, we see a list of invoices and we can preview it and print it and maybe do something more. This customer portal is a custom web application running on your server. And this portal also supports a web API. It supports different methods, but one of them is create invoice. And this is a REST JSON API. So it receives the parameters of the JSON structure. And we will also use logic apps to call this create invoice method. So let's create a new logic app. Create it. Let's wait that it is created. So while we are waiting for it, every web API has some specific about the authentication, about how to send the details and that stuff. So these are the challenges that we will have to solve somehow, okay, in our logic app. In this case, I've already prepared the code to speed it up. And I will just copy paste the code. And let's see it in the designer. There are still some warnings that we have to solve. One is that we have to connect our connector to the right identity and to the right event grid topic. Okay, so this workflow is triggered when the event arrives in the sales invoice topic. That's our topic. Then we parse the business event. We already know it. And then we make an authentication request, providing the credentials, HTTP request for authentication. And a result of this request is authentication token. Then we create our create invoice call, providing authorization token in the header and providing a JSON content in the body with all these data about invoice ID, document URL, invoice account, and others. So that's it. We save this app. Let's go here. And let's post another invoice and see if it comes in the customer portal, to the customer portal. Good. And let's go to the customer portal. And in a few seconds, we should receive a notification that the invoice has arrived. Okay, it's here. This time it was quick. This is our new invoice. We can take a look at it. And that's how it works on our sample customer portal. So the next use case is customer's ERP system. So it's an ERP system of a customer. So it's in another domain, another users, another security. Of course, it should receive just the invoices for these customers. Because we are on a Dynamics conference, I have implemented a sample ERP system using the finance and operations technology, but it can be any other, like SAP, Oracle, or whatever. So in this case, the customers has given us a sample .NET code, and we will use this code using Azure functions. So how to use, first we will see how we can run an Azure function. To run an Azure function or to develop an Azure function, you need the Visual Studio 2017 or 2019. Just create a new project. You select an Azure Functions type of project. Create it. Then we have to select a trigger. We will select Event Grid Trigger. And that's pretty much it. This code will create a sample Azure function named function1. When we build it and publish it, we will get this function on our Azure portal. But to speed it up, I have already done this coding part. I've received that code from my customer, and I've added this function part. So we are creating a create invoice Azure function, and this function gets an event grid event as an input parameter. Then it parses the data field of an event grid event and gets a business event data. And from this business event data, we call the create invoice call. And just of curiosity, it's actually the code that calls a custom service on a finance and operation environment. It uses an OAuth authentication. And okay, here we have to fill these credentials. We will use the same credentials that we already are using in our demo. And then it creates a JSON body for the method called, and call the method. Good. We just have to build it. And then we have to publish it. We will publish it to Azure. Azure function actually runs, somewhere in Azure in some kind of container, and we will select the Windows container because we're using a Windows technology. Create a new one. Put it in our resource group in the location that we are typically using, and our storage account, and creating. Okay, and now we are creating a deployment profile. Okay, editors, this step will last later, so I will count 1 to 3 when I will want to continue. So let's click Finish. Now we have a deployment profile. Don't care about this warning, it's okay. But we still have to, now we have a publishing profile, not a deployment profile, but we still have to publish. Editors, again, this step will last some time. So we have successfully published our Azure function. Now let's go to Azure portal. Okay, we can. And we see that we have a function app resource and we have an app service resource. So that's as an effect that the Azure function has been published. But if we go to our Azure Grid topic, we still don't have a subscription for it. we have to manually add the subscription. And let's select here on Azure function, select our create invoice Azure function, send to ERP. Oh, I forget to show what the customer ERP actually is. So that's how my sample customer's ERP looks like. And this is the form that is important from our demo, so where the vendor invoices are collected. So now we have prepared for now we're back to event grid topic, where we are just creating a subscription. We don't have to forget the filter for this subscription, because this application customer ERP has to receive just the events for these customers. And it would be great if we could parse on something like this, invoice account. But because the payload of a data field that actually contains a business event is not a JSON object, but a string, we can do like that. Event grid cannot parse the string. It expects a JSON object. So we have to use a trick and just just search for this substring in a long data string. That's a trick that works, but it would be much easier and flexible and reliable if the finance and operations would send the the JSON object as a data field instead of a string containing a JSON object. Okay, we have deployed this. Now let's go and post 2 invoices. Now we will post one invoice for the customer US 001 that should reach our customer ERP, and another one for the customer 003 that should not reach the ERP. So let's post both invoices. Okay, this is the first one and the second one. Now running the Azure function usually takes some more time than Logic apps, but let's see. Okay, this time we were quick and the invoice has already reached. Just the invoice for the customer's US 001, not the second one for the customer US 03. Just for the reference, we can check on the customer portal when we see both invoices. Okay, so to summarize what we have learned. When finance and operation posts the invoice and creates an invoice document, it can save the invoice document to Azure storage and send the business event with its metadata to Event Grid. From there, it is forwarded to all interested subscribed applications that use the document metadata and download its content from the Azure storage. So that was the demo that we just presented. That was all for today. Thank you for your attention. Thanks Dynamics.com and all the voters that selected this session. I hope you find it useful. Now I would ask anybody to join the conference chat and send the questions. It's time for Q&A and discussion. And after the session, you can also reach me on email or Teams if you missed this conference chat.